I've argued that they're dead wrong. The question is still open. How do we account for qualities, phenomenal qualities? How do we account for experience in a naturalistic setting? We don't know yet. And I might be wrong. Dan might be wrong. The illusionists might be wrong. But we cannot jump to any conclusion at this point about the fact that there are categorically no qualities. That claim has to be shown as a conclusion of a theory of consciousness. You can't just come out and say there are no qualities.
You mentioned Dennett. What do you make of his conception of consciousness? Because it's pretty different from yours and mine. And I remember I was watching a TED talk that he gave on explaining consciousness, and I think he just completely missed the mark. I mean, he was like giving a talk on a completely different topic, I felt like. So what do you make of his conception? My understanding is he completely denies this hard problem of consciousness. He says there is none. It's just all, you can just explain it in terms of a mechanistic thing. But maybe I'm misunderstanding or misrepresenting his views.
No, I mean, Dennett is an illusionist. And the illusionists, and they're a growing bunch of philosophers, and their claim is that phenomenal consciousness, the idea that consciousness has qualitative feel to it, is an illusion. There's nothing qualitative about consciousness. So Dennett is saying, and his other illusionists like Keith Frankish, and there are many of them these days, say that no, there's nothing qualitative about pain. You might think that there's a qualitative feel to pain, but that's actually an illusion. All that exists are, and there's nothing private about consciousness either, because since it's physical, there's nothing specifically private or subjective about my experience. It's only the contingent fact that these brain states happen to be located here. But if we could see all my brain states, you'd be seeing my experience of pain, which I find to be a difficult claim to sustain. So anyway, I completely disagree with Dennett and the illusionists, because I think qualities are real. The way things feel are where we start in thinking about consciousness. But I think the reason that Dennett and other illusionists go this route is because they can't see how physicalism can account for qualities. And it's true. We don't yet know if qualities can be assimilated into a physicalist worldview, a physicalist understanding of what consciousness is. It's an open question.
Yeah.
And there's research ongoing, and maybe I'm wrong. It could be that there are no qualities to experience, but it really, illusionists will say, Dennett will say, yeah, it really seems like there's a feel to pain. It's the hurt that you're feeling. It seems like it's a private, qualitative thing that only you have access to. But no, that seeming is an illusion. Now, I don't think it's illusory at all. I think it's exactly what we're confronted with in being conscious creatures. It's the qualitative aspects of sensations, of emotions, of even something as subtle as thinking a thought has a phenomenal, that is, qualitative aspect to it. So anyway, deep fundamental disagreement about what consciousness is. The illusionists just deny, and I've tried to pin them down on this. They are forced to deny that there are any qualities to experience. But if you look at the dictionary, the idea of a quality is completely commonsensical. People know what you mean by sweet, pain, the way things feel, the expression of what it's like. That's the way phenomenal consciousness is always talked about. What is it like to feel pain? And that's called phenomenal consciousness. That's what the illusionists like Dennett deny exists. All they say that exists is maybe some functional idea of consciousness, or what Ned Block calls access consciousness. But there's no phenomenal consciousness. Okay, I mean, I've tried to do my, I've argued that they're dead wrong, and that the case is the question is still open. How do we account for qualities, phenomenal qualities? How do we account for experience in a naturalistic setting? And the question is open. We don't know yet, and I might be wrong. Dan might be wrong. The illusionists might be wrong, but we cannot jump to any conclusion at this point about the fact that there are categorically no qualities. That claim has to be shown as a conclusion of a theory of consciousness. You can't just come out and say there are no qualities.
Yeah.
Which is, to me, what the illusionists are doing.
So is what illusionists are saying that basically just consciousness in general is not real, it's an illusion?
Well, they're saying that, no, they're not saying that consciousness is an illusion. They're not saying that experience is an illusion. They're saying it isn't what we think it is.
Okay.
It isn't what I'm claiming it is.
Okay.
And so I'm claiming that consciousness has a feel to it, has sensory feels and qualities, that it's like something to feel pain, that in describing the physical mechanisms around pain that are in my head, you're not getting at the essence of pain. The essence of pain is the feeling. And you can't put a feeling on a lab bench, as I think Anil Seth, who's written a great book about consciousness, once put it in a recent debate about consciousness. You can't, and since you can't do that, that poses a problem, immediate problem for physicalism. Physicalism being the thesis that anything that's real, you could essentially put on a lab bench and look at.
Mm.
So, but as a naturalist, I don't think we're necessarily committed to physicalism as a thesis about ultimate reality. And it could be that this is an interesting question, an interesting open question. How do we incorporate consciousness into a naturalistic worldview? And is it necessarily the case that physicalism is where we end up? I don't think it's necessarily the case. And that does not commit us to any kind of sort of spooky woo or supernaturalism. It's simply to take the question of consciousness seriously as something to be studied and not ruled out of court simply because you're committed to physicalism as a metaphysical thesis. Science is not committed to physicalism. Mm-hmm. It's committed to understanding consciousness as we decided to think about it. And most, I'd say the majority still, and not everyone, but the majority of people thinking about and studying consciousness do think that phenomenal consciousness, the feels of pain, the feel of tasting, the sensation of red, all of these are real and need accounting for somehow. Mm. In other words, most folks are not illusionists, but illusionists are making a very strong attempt to sort of push back against the very idea of phenomenal consciousness.
Right. And what do you make of the claim that consciousness itself is an illusion? Because that's something I've also heard. And what would you call that belief? It's not an illusionist belief, I think you said, but what would you say about this sort of claim?
I wouldn't know how to interpret it. I mean, to say that something, we'd have to decide what we're talking about, and then say that it's unreal, it doesn't exist. So to say that consciousness doesn't exist would be to say what? That we're not having any experiences right now.
That's how I interpret it, yeah.
Yeah, it would be to say there's no such thing as experience, there's no such thing as sensations or thought. There are no mental phenomena the way we common sensely think about them, as in dreams or thoughts or feelings. I just don't see how that's a sustainable thing to say. So I don't know who would say there is no such thing as consciousness. Maybe people do say that. I don't know.
I've heard it on the Making Sense podcast a number of just like Sam mentioned it as a ridiculous kind of argument against his position, but yeah.
Yeah. I think Sam and I and others do take conscious experience as that which it's very difficult to doubt the existence of. And it's a kind of the Cartesian insight that Descartes said that, this is the one thing he couldn't really doubt. And, I'm with him there. But it doesn't mean I'm a Cartesian in supposing that consciousness has to be something necessarily non-physical or necessarily physical. Again, that's an open question. But to say that there is no such thing as consciousness, if a conscious creature asserts that, and only conscious creatures could, it seems like a performative self-contradiction, or performative contradiction, as they say, right?
Right.
You're telling me that there's no consciousness, but so you're not conscious right now, and you're telling me there's no consciousness. Okay, so what is it that's telling me this? There's no experience there. So even the claim that there's no consciousness has to involve an idea, a conception of consciousness, which seems to me to require a conscious creature. But
right. Yeah, the only reason we talk about this problem of consciousness or consciousness in general is that we are conscious and that we have direct experience of it and evidence of it. Otherwise, we wouldn't be talking about it. That's the way Sam Harris usually puts it. So that's the one thing that can't be an illusion, because if it just, he says it seems like it, but the fact that it seems already proves the point. Yeah,
right. Well, the illusionists would say that the seeming, they would say it seems like we have qualitative fields to experience it. But they would say that's a mistake, that we're misrepresenting, that we're making a claim that isn't sustained by any careful analysis of our situation, that science will not sustain the claim that we're actually having feelings, even though we're claiming to. So again, the illusionists are not denying consciousness. They're denying that consciousness has as an aspect to it something that is qualitative. And that's what they're getting rid of. But they would still say consciousness exists as a sort of a functional, how would they put it? It's physical, it's functional, it's representational. And part of what consciousness does is misrepresent itself as having qualities. But no one, I don't think, or very few people are in the business of denying consciousness as something that exists that illusionists claim don't involve qualities. I think it does. Illusionists claim it doesn't. Okay. But there's something going on right now that both of us are privy to in terms of our own experience, right? Illusionists have to grant that.
Mm-hmm.
Dennett grants that. The question is, what is it? And what does it essentially involve? And they're phenomenologists who say who in a way agree with the illusionists, saying that there's nothing essentially phenomenal about consciousness, but it's essentially intentional. They put aside, the phenomenologists I've been discovering recently, put aside any metaphysical presupposition, say just look at experience. Don't do any metaphysics, just look at the nature of your experience, and you'll see that's essentially intentional, that is representational. It's not essentially phenomenal the way I think. Okay, fair enough. So again, there are different ideas of what consciousness essentially involves. But to say there's nothing there, I don't know. That's where I plant my flag with Descartes.
Yeah.